All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive on productivity and procrastination. You sent over the book Do It Today by Darius Foroux,
Yeah,
right?
that's the one.
Okay, awesome. So it was to unpack some of the best tips for how to stop procrastinating and boost your productivity. And
So
I
there's
think this will be a fun one.
Mhm.
Let's jump right in. So one of the most interesting things that Foroux talks about is how procrastination isn't actually about laziness. It's more about our brains trying to avoid tasks that feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people can relate to his story about his first summer job, where he would do almost anything to avoid making sales calls.
Yeah, totally. I mean, taking detailed notes after every call, that was me in my first job too. Like I was just trying to find any way to not actually have to do the work. But that brings up a good point. What are some of our like go-to procrastination tactics? Like what do we do when we're trying to avoid doing something? And why do those things, even though we know they're not productive, why do they feel so good?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think Foro would say that it's because those activities offer instant gratification, even if they don't really help us reach our long-term goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like scrolling through social media or online shopping, it's like a quick hit of dopamine, but then you're left with the same work you were trying to avoid.
Exactly. It's all about understanding those patterns and finding healthier ways to deal with those feelings of discomfort or resistance towards certain tasks.
Okay, so we've talked about the why behind procrastination, but what about the solution? How do we actually get ourselves to do the things we need to do?
Well, Foro actually found that his productivity skyrocketed when he started doing work that he was truly passionate about.
So he's saying that like finding work you love is the key.
Pretty much. He argues that all the productivity hacks and tips in the world won't make a difference if you're not engaged in what you're doing. It's like that quote by Ryan Holiday, "Life is too short to read books you don't enjoy reading." I think the same applies to work.
Wow, yeah, that's a really good point. Life is definitely too short to be stuck doing work that drains you. So finding that meaningful work seems like a good first step. But what about those tasks that we just can't avoid? You know, the ones that are necessary, but maybe not our favorite? Thoreau has a pretty unique take on that. He says overcoming procrastination is kind of like preparing for a battle. You need both mental and physical strength.
He's not wrong. He even suggests incorporating daily practices like stoicism, pragmatism, mindfulness, and exercise to cultivate that war-ready mindset.
Okay, so hold on a second. Stoicism and pragmatism, that sounds pretty intense. How do those philosophies help with actually getting things done?
Sure. So stoicism in a nutshell, it's about focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't, which is super helpful when you feel overwhelmed because you realize you can only do so much.
Okay, I see.
And pragmatism, it's about being practical and focusing on results. So you
Yeah.
cut through distractions and get to the heart of what needs to be done.
Ugh. Okay, so it's about more than just willpower. It's about approaching your tasks with a clear and calm mind and a plan of action.
Right. Foro wants you to be prepared to tackle those challenging tasks head on, not with just willpower, but with a strong mental and physical foundation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Uh,
But even with the right mindset, I sometimes feel lost without a clear plan. Like I know what I need to do, but I don't know where to start. This is where Foro's emphasis on having a system for productivity really resonated with me.
oh yeah, systems are key. He's all about having a structured approach instead of relying solely on motivation, which we know can fluctuate. He actually has a whole system outlined in the book with elements like self-imposed deadlines, accountability partners, working in intervals, exercise, and a healthy diet. A lot of it is backed by science, too.
That sounds super comprehensive, but honestly a little overwhelming. How practical is it to implement all of that at
Yeah,
once?
you don't have to jump in all at once. He doesn't expect that. The important thing is to find a system that works for you. Experiment, start small, try different things out, and see what helps you stay focused.
So it's more about personalization than having one right way to do things.
Yeah, finding what clicks for you is essential. But remember, Four emphasizes that the system itself isn't magic. It's the why behind the work that matters. It's that deeper motivation that drives your productivity in the long run.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have the why, we have a system, but even with all that, staying focused in our world of constant distractions can feel impossible. That's where I found Foro's idea of managing attention, not time, really interesting.
Yeah, that's a big one. He points out that time just keeps ticking on, right? You can't really manage it, but you can manage where you focus your attention.
So instead of trying to cram more into our already busy schedules, it's about being more mindful of where we're directing our mental energy.
Exactly. And Foru uses this analogy. He says our brains are like survival machines. They're always scanning for threats or distractions. which is why focusing can be so hard. Our brains are just wired to be on high alert all the time.
So how do we combat that? I mean, he actually recommends disconnecting from the internet to regain control of our attention, which sounds a bit extreme. Is that really necessary?
Well, it might seem like a drastic measure, but he argues that the boost in focus and productivity you get from disconnecting outweighs the initial discomfort.
It makes you think.
When was the last time you had a truly uninterrupted block of time to work on something important?
It's been a while, I'll admit. But I also wonder how realistic that is for people who work online or rely on the internet for their jobs.
Yeah, it's definitely not always feasible to completely disconnect. But even small steps like turning off notifications, setting aside specific times for checking email, and being more mindful of how you're using the internet can make a huge difference.
That's good advice, something we can all actually do. And speaking of managing our time and energy, Foro also has a pretty specific evening ritual. He suggests that helps set you up for a productive day.
Oh, the 30-minute ritual. I have to admit, when I first read about it, I was like, who has time for that? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense.
Break it down for us. What does it involve?
Okay, so basically it's three main things. Shutting down work for the day with a quick review, planning for the next day, and visualization. It's about creating a clear transition from work mode to relaxation mode.
So you end the day with a sense of closure and then you prime your mind for the next day.
Exactly. The review helps you tie up any loose ends. The planning part reduces stress and anxiety because you have a clear plan when you wake up. And the visualization part, that's like mentally preparing yourself for a successful day.
Okay, so it's about being proactive instead of reactive with your time and energy. I like that. But what about those times when we're feeling stuck? Maybe even paralyzed by the fear of not being good enough. Foro addresses that too, right?
Yes, he has a whole section on perfectionism and how it can actually sabotage your productivity, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right? We usually think of perfectionists as high achievers.
Right.
But he argues that it's a double-edged sword. He actually outlines two types of perfectionists. The one who's so afraid of not doing something perfectly that they don't even start, and the one who starts but sets these impossibly high standards and ends up constantly self-sabotaging.
Oh, wow. I see myself in both of those descriptions at different times. So what's the key to escaping the perfectionism trap?
Foroux suggests focusing on progress over perfection. Celebrating the small wins and reminding yourself of past successes to boost your confidence and motivation.
So shifting our mindset from fear of failure to a focus on growth and learning.
Exactly. And on that note of mindset shifts, Foroux introduces another interesting concept, embracing boredom.
Boredom. Isn't that what we're trying to avoid with all this productivity talk?
I know, right? Seems counterintuitive. But he argues that in our constantly stimulated world, we've lost touch with the power of boredom.
Okay, you've got me intrigued. Tell me more about this power of boredom.
Well, Foroux suggests that boredom can actually be a source of creativity and new ideas. He even talks about Andy Warhol as someone who embraced boredom, allowing his mind to wander and make unexpected connections.
So it's about resisting the urge to constantly fill every moment and allowing our minds some space to just be. It almost sounds like a form of mindfulness.
It is. He argues that those moments of quiet reflection are often when our best ideas come to us. But then the question becomes, how do we translate those flashes of inspiration into tangible results?
That's where Forough's emphasis on consistency comes in, right?
Exactly. He stresses that real change doesn't come from grand gestures or overnight transformations. It comes from making small, consistent improvements every single day.
He talks about the power of improving just 0.1% each day, which sounds almost too simple to be effective.
But think about it. Those small improvements, when you do them consistently over time, they add up to significant progress. It's all about building momentum and staying the course even when you don't see immediate results.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into Do It Today. We explored everything from understanding the root causes of procrastination to building a system, managing our attention, embracing boredom, and the power of consistency. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, and we're just getting started. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into Foroux's strategies for overcoming those mental roadblocks and truly unlocking your full potential.
Awesome. I'm excited to keep going. So listeners, make sure you come back for part 2. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, so we're back and ready to dive into part 2 of our deep dive on Do It Today. In the last part, we talked a lot about personal systems and mindset, but I want to pick up on this idea of unlocking our full potential that you mentioned. And Foroux has this kind of controversial take on success, right? Like he challenges the traditional idea that competition is the only way to get ahead.
Yeah, he really flips the script on that. He encourages a shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. So instead of seeing everything as a zero-sum game, you start to see the potential for everyone to succeed.
So it's like moving away from that dog-eat-dog mentality to a more collaborative approach.
Exactly. He argues that when you're constantly worried about the competition, it can actually hold you back from reaching your full potential.
Yeah.
It creates fear and stagnation, while focusing on creation and innovation opens up so many more possibilities.
It's like they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. If you focus on creating value, everyone benefits, not just you.
He has this really thought-provoking line in the book. He says that if you don't believe in future growth, you're basically betting against mankind. It makes you realize the incredible potential we have as humans when we work together and focus on creating something new.
That's a powerful way to put it. So how do we practically shift from that competition mode to a creation mode? Where do we even begin? Foro suggests going back to basics, right?
Right. He emphasizes the importance of mastering the fundamentals of your work or skill, no matter how experienced you are. He actually uses the example of Daniel Cormier, the UFC champion.
Hmm.
Cormier attributes a lot of his success to consistently practicing and refining those basic techniques.
Oh, interesting. So it's not about always trying to learn the most advanced stuff or find shortcuts.
It's tempting to jump ahead, but Foroux argues that true mastery comes from building that strong foundation first.
Okay, that makes sense. And he applies this idea of repetition and mastery not just to physical skills, but to mental strength as well, right? Like he talks about training his mind like an athlete.
Exactly. He uses techniques like visualization, stoicism, and self-reflection to develop that mental resilience. It's like working out your brain, making it stronger.
Wait, so we can actually train our minds to be stronger? How does that work?
It's about building mental muscle, just like you would build physical muscle. The more you practice focusing your attention, managing your emotions, and overcoming challenges, the more resilient you become. Forough uses stoicism to help him stay calm and rational under pressure. He uses visualization to mentally rehearse challenging situations and build confidence. And he uses self-reflection to learn from his experiences and constantly improve.
Wow, so it's not just about powering through things. It's about equipping yourself with the mental tools to be focused and motivated even when things get tough.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that inner strength to keep going even when you face setbacks or negative thoughts.
Mm.
But even with the right mindset, a solid system, and that mental and physical strength, there's one more crucial piece. 4O emphasizes for actually achieving our goals.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the missing piece?
Focus. He stresses that we simply can't do everything at once, so we have to direct our energy strategically to make the biggest impact.
So it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart.
Exactly. He's a big advocate for focusing on one major project or goal at a time. He says this laser focus leads to faster progress and better results. It's kind of like saying don't put all your eggs in one basket, but in this case, it's a good thing.
I can see how concentrating your efforts on one thing at a time could help you achieve more, faster. Does Foro give any examples of how he uses this in his own life?
Yeah, he talks about how he sets aside specific blocks of time for his most important work. And during that time, he eliminates all distractions and resists the urge to multitask. He argues that when you divide your attention, you dilute your efforts. But when you focus on one thing at a time, you amplify your results.
That makes a lot of sense. And it connects back to his idea of managing attention, not time.
Right.
By being strategic with our focus, we can maximize our output, even if we don't have a ton of time.
And he ties this focused effort to the concept of compounding. He believes that success builds on itself when you consistently direct your energy toward those important goals. It's like a snowball effect.
So instead of spreading ourselves too thin, we should be making those focused investments that create a ripple effect of success over time.
Exactly. And that's one of the key takeaways from Do It Today. It's not about doing more. It's about doing the right things in a focused and consistent way.
It's about building that foundation of mental and physical strength, creating a system that supports you, and then strategically channeling your energy into those areas that will have the greatest impact. It's starting to feel like all these pieces fit together now.
It does, right? It all comes together to paint the bigger picture of how we can achieve lasting success. And Forough reminds us that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's about using these principles to reach those long-term goals that might have once seemed out of reach.
Okay, that's a good point to pause and reflect. I think we've uncovered some really valuable insights from Do It Today, from the importance of mindset and systems to the power of focus and consistency, but there's still more to explore.
Definitely. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll wrap up our deep dive and leave you with some actionable challenges to help you put these principles into practice in your own life.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into Do It Today. It's been an incredible journey, hasn't it? From battling procrastination to building systems and training our minds like athletes, we've explored a lot. But before we wrap up, there's one more concept from the book I really want to touch on: the power of belief.
Yes. Foroux dedicates a whole chapter to this, and it's super important. He makes the case that belief is much more than just wishful thinking, you know?
Yeah.
It's actually a really practical tool for shaping our reality.
You know what really struck me was his story about being discouraged from pursuing writing, how it totally eroded his belief in himself, and then how he was able to reclaim that belief through a really pragmatic approach. It makes you think about how much our beliefs, the good and the bad ones, shape our actions, don't they? And ultimately, they shape our outcomes.
Totally. He really hammers home this idea. If your mind can conceive it, you can achieve it. It's like a call to action to believe in ourselves and our potential, not to let those limiting beliefs hold us back.
Yeah, it's not about blind optimism. It's about having faith in our capacity to learn, grow, and achieve our goals. But okay, we've covered a ton of practical strategies from Do It Today: building systems, managing our attention, mastering our minds, and now cultivating belief. But where do we start putting all this into practice? What's that first step?
Forough actually gives us a simple challenge. Focus on improving by just 0.1% every day. I know. It sounds almost too simple to be true, but it's about those small changes, you know?
Right. Instead of trying to transform our lives overnight, it's about taking baby steps, creating lasting habits. What are some examples of how we can actually put this 0.1% principle to work in our lives?
Well, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be something like going for a 10-minute walk each day to get your body moving, spending 15 minutes decluttering your workspace to clear your mind, or even just writing one paragraph of that project you've been putting off. It's about building momentum, one small step at a time.
I love those examples. It makes the whole journey of personal growth seem a lot less daunting, doesn't it?
Totally. That's what's so great about Forough's approach. He takes these big, sometimes overwhelming ideas and breaks them down into manageable steps that anyone can take.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Do It Today, what's the one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with? What should they take away from all this?
Think about one specific area of your life you want to improve. It could be your health, your work, your relationships, really anything that matters to you. Then ask yourself, what's one tiny action, just one, that I can do today to get 0.1% better? Remember, it all adds up. Start small, keep at it, and watch as those small wins transform into something amazing.
I love that challenge. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey through Do It Today. I know I'm leaving with a ton of inspiration and a renewed sense of what's possible.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And for our listeners, remember, the power to create the life you want is within you. And it all starts right now. So go out there and make it happen.